What's going on, everybody? It's just another day in the kitchen, back with another episode, and in today's video we're throwing it back all the way to 2008 to take a look at Kanye West's legendary album Graduation and the tour and legendary merch surrounding it. Now, for those of you like me who have been eagerly anticipating the release of the upcoming album Vultures, unfortunately I got no updates for you, so I figured this would be a dope video to hold us over in the meantime. And before we get started, I want to give a special shout out to my homie Strain Beats for curating the beats for this video, along with all of my other kitchen videos. Make sure you give the homie a follow. And while you're here, you might as well drop a like and subscribe, and join our free Discord to stay up to date with the latest and the greatest. And shout out to the homie Max of Craze, who actually put together a dope analysis of one of my videos. Make sure you guys check it out. And as always, shout out to my chefs for recommending what you'd like to see me cover in the comments. I remember this one from 5 months ago, so you never know when your comment's gonna make it in the next video. And if you're like me, this Graduation album definitely holds a lot of sentimental value. And I might be showing my age given that I grew up with this one, but it's honestly my favorite project, and I'd love to know what yours is in the comments. Now, it's no surprise that Kanye would then go on to sell over 957,000 records of this album during its first release, given how many bangers there are on this one and how it still holds up to this day. So it only makes sense that Kanye and his team would put together a legendary tour the following year known as the Glow in the Dark Tour. As you can see, it featured legendary guests such as Rihanna, NERD, and Pharrell, as well as Lupe Fiasco, another legend in the Chicago hip-hop scene, especially during that era. Now, throughout the rest of this video, we'll be viewing some exclusive footage that was shot behind the scenes of this now legendary glow-in-the-dark tour all the way back from 2008. You have to remember that this was Kanye's third tour, and I think it's cool to see his merch evolution and just his vision overall. During this era, Kanye of course teamed up with none other than Takashi Murakami, who of course came up with the album cover for Graduation, as well as stylizing the now iconic Kanye bear that we've all come to love. And it was while I was doing my research for this video that I actually came across this photo of very popular UK artist Central C, who was spotted wearing this glow-in-the-dark merch at one of his recent performances. I think it's actually so cool to see some of this old merch out in the wild like this, and especially for somebody who was influenced by Kanye themselves. Now, this glow-in-the-dark tour was pretty legendary for a bunch of different reasons, but one of my favorite parts of this was the fact that Kanye was wearing these prototypes of his upcoming Nike Air Yeezys. If you're not too familiar with Kanye's shoe history, he of course had his legendary collaboration with Nike first, and those of you who were lucky enough to attend this glow-in-the-dark tour actually got to see this legendary pair of shoes. And for those of you that are huge sneakerheads like myself, you'll know just how crazy Kanye's Nike collaboration was. And for those of you that aren't, if you'd like a video talking about it, let me know in the comments because I'd love to cover it. Now, in addition to Kanye wearing this prototype of the upcoming Nike Air Yeezys, he was also debuting a different range of outfits. During this era, gangsta rap was still kind of transitioning into what Kanye would represent at this time, and I think it's actually really cool from the artistic perspective that he was actually experimenting and doing different things with both set design as well as his aesthetics and the things that he's wearing. And while talking about Kanye's outfits and choice of attire for this glow-in-the-dark tour, I wanted to point out something that stood out to me. It was while I was watching this video in particular and doing the research for this video that I thought that this outfit looked very familiar. Because if you ask me, I feel like the outfit that Kanye's protege right here is wearing looks definitely inspired by the glow-in-the-dark tour attire. Now, for those of you that are not familiar, this is none other than LaFlame, aka Travis Scott, on his most recent Utopia tour. Now, it might be a reach here, but I think that the attire that he's wearing here is kind of similar to Kanye's attire on that glow-in-the-dark tour. And given that Travis is more or less his protege and very much so inspired by him, I wouldn't be surprised if there was at least some kind of inspiration there. Now, I do think it's also sick to see these clips and see just how lit Kanye was all the way back in the day. And you can really see the era that we're in. And although I had to remove the audio because of copyright issues, you can see how the fans were actually sobbing because they got to see the GOAT perform. Now, I mentioned earlier in the video that the glow-in-the-dark tour also featured some guests, including none other than Kanye's mentor himself, Jay-Z. And I think that that's actually super special given that the glow-in-the-dark tour would end up grossing over $30 million by the end of it and was the second highest grossing tour just behind Jay-Z's Heart of the City tour. And something else that I think is sick that you can see from this glow-in-the-dark tour footage is that Kanye actually always cared about his stage presence and the actual artistry when it came to his performances. Not many artists actually care what the stage looks like, so I think it's cool that you can see all the way back in 2008 that he had custom sets and custom designs. And even back then, he was bringing the baddies out to his shows. Now how he's dancing right here is how I hope to be dancing this upcoming January 12th when Vultures is supposed to drop, but that remains to be seen. Now as far as the merch that was featured on this glow in the dark tour, there were some dope pieces that actually did glow in the dark given the name. And we also see more pieces which are featuring the now iconic Takashi Murakami Kanye bear, which I think is always pretty dope. Now another thing I wanted to point out for those of you that weren't able to pick it up on the merch pieces we just saw is that the tags on those pieces said Gildan. So that gives us an idea of the merch quality for these pieces all the way back in 2008. I don't think a lot of artists back then were necessarily caring about the quality, so it's no surprise that these ended up being printed on Gildan blanks. Now in addition to this traditional merch, there was also a book that was written titled Glow in the Dark, which featured some dope photos from the tour as well as some more behind the scenes type of content. And honestly, when I think about it, I think the world is long overdue for like an official Kanye autobiography, and I think that would go crazy, and if you guys agree, let me know in the comments. And although I got the privilege of seeing Kanye during his St. Pablo tour and era, I can't help but think he's definitely long overdue for another world tour, because there's always a new generation of Ye fans that have yet to experience the GOAT in real time, and if anything, you know that there's going to be a lot of effort involved. And in addition to traditional merch pieces that we saw such as tees and hoodies and things like that, there were also some cool collector's pieces such as laminates as well as the famous shutter glasses, which have become a staple of Kanye's earlier years. Now throughout the rest of this footage, you'll see a lot of Kanye's collaborators such as Don C, who we just saw, who is another famous Chicago designer and has been part of Kanye's career throughout at least his early career. And while watching this footage play back, I can't help but wonder what Kanye would have to say if you could interview him all the way back in 2008. Here's another photo of him actually styling Rihanna and getting her outfit together before she performed, and I think it's a cool example of how Kanye had his hand in fashion all the way back then. Now as far as how the tees are holding up all these years later, given that they're printed on Gildan, I was surprised to see some in such good condition. You can definitely still find some online if you really dig for them, however, given that these were released in 2008, I would say the likelihood of them being authentic is very slim unless you get them from like an authorized collector or something like that, if that makes sense. Now if you made it this far in the video, I'd love to know what you guys think. I thought that this would be a very interesting video to hold us over in the meantime while we wait for this Vultures album to drop, and I think it's so cool to see how Kanye's influence was all the way back in 2008. He was definitely more lively back then, but you can see how he cared about his stage presence, the production of his actual stage, and just the fashion and design aspect, which we still see all these years later in 2024. Now with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and let me know what you guys think about this video. Thank you so much for cooking with the kitchen, and remember, it's lit, straight up, and peace.